Hey everyone, and welcome. First off, I just have to say a huge congratulations. You've hit a massive milestone in your Capstone project. You have worked all year, you've learned the tools, you've built the mechanics, and now you've got an MVP.
Yep, that's right, a minimum viable product. That means you have a functional, playable game. Your core mechanics are in there, your custom scripts are running, and you've even got multiple levels. Just take a second and let that sink in. You built a world from pretty much nothing. That's incredible.
So here's the big question, right? Now what? Your game works, but maybe it doesn't quite feel, finished. Well, that's what we're here for. We're going to dive into how to take that functional MVP and turn it into a polished masterpiece. This is the final, and honestly the most rewarding part of the whole journey.
So, look, your MVP is probably missing a few things, right? Maybe some sound effects, a full-on user interface, some menus, or even proper spawn points. And you know what? That is 100% okay. In fact, that was the plan all along. Your MVP is the skeleton. Now we get to add the muscle, the skin, and all the personality.
Here's our quest map for getting your game to the finish line. We're going to start by really thinking about the player's experience. Then we'll dive into crafting better levels and uncovering the psychology of what makes a game fun. After that, we'll get into the final polish and wrap it all up by documenting the awesome work you've done.
Let's kick things off with designing for your player. This is all about the user interface, or the UI. It's literally the first thing your player is going to interact with, and it really sets the tone for the entire experience.
Okay, here's a fun one you've probably never even thought about. On a Mac, the cancel button is on the left. On Windows, it's on the right. Now, neither one of these is right or wrong, but here's the thing. People who use those systems expect it to be that way, and that matters a ton because players never, ever start your game with a totally blank slate.
And this brings us to this really important idea called cognitive baggage. Designer Ara Sharinian talks about this. Basically, your players bring all their past experiences from other games, from websites, from everything with them. A good UI meets those expectations. It feels intuitive, not by accident, but by design. So your goal here is simple. Make your menus and your heads-up displays clear, functional, and familiar.
All right, so let's take that idea and move on to building better worlds. Because you see, meeting player expectations doesn't just stop with menus. It goes straight into the game world itself. We're talking about the patterns of great level design. These are the secret techniques you're going to use to turn a basic space into a truly engaging journey.
First up is guidance. Think of this as your invisible hand, subtly pointing the player where you want them to go without screaming it in their face. It could be a little trail of coins leading to a secret, or maybe the way the landscape funnels them forward. It could even be a single brightly lit doorway in a dark room that just makes you want to go check it out.
Next, every great level absolutely needs a safe zone. This is just a spot where the player can catch their breath. They can look at the next big challenge and actually make a plan. It's that moment of calm that makes all the action feel even more intense. And it's super important right where a player spawns into a new level.
Oh, and foreshadowing. This is going to be your best friend for teaching players without a boring tutorial screen. Here's how it works. You introduce a new enemy or a new hazard in a really simple, low-stakes situation first. That way, the player learns how it works, so when they see it later in a much harder setup, they feel prepared. They feel smart.
And that leads perfectly into our next pattern, layering. See, once you've taught the player a few different things through foreshadowing, you can start layering them together. Maybe you combine that new enemy with, say, a moving platform they've already mastered. What you get is a brand new, complex challenge that's made up of parts the player already understands. It's brilliant.
Okay, so we've covered the what of design, the UI, the level patterns, but now let's get into the why. What is the psychological secret that makes the game feel so good you just completely lose track of time?
Well, the answer is a psychological concept called flow. You've probably felt it before. It's when you're in the zone. It's that magical state where you are so locked into what you're doing that the entire world around you just disappears. Your actions feel effortless and you're performing at your absolute best. This, right here, is the ultimate goal for your player.
So, how do you design for flow in your game? How do you create that feeling? It all comes down to one core idea: finding the perfect balance between the game's challenge and the player's skill.
Think about it. If the game's challenge is way too high for what the player can do, it creates anxiety. They get frustrated. They feel overwhelmed. They quit. If their skill is way higher than the challenge, that just leads to boredom. They tune out.
But when the challenge perfectly matches their skill and pushes it just a little bit, that is the sweet spot. That's flow. So as you're designing your levels and you're thinking about how the difficulty ramps up, you have to keep asking yourself this question. How can you use those tools, like foreshadowing and layering, to guide your player into that flow state, and more importantly, keep them there? This is the true art of game design.
Okay, let's get super practical for a second with the final polish. You all have the grading rubrics for your capstone, right? I want you to stop thinking of them as a test. From now on, I want you to see them as your secret weapon, an expert design checklist for exactly what a finished, polished game needs. Just take a look at the level design checklist. Do these words look familiar? Guidance, layering, foreshadowing, safe zones. We just talked about all of these. See? The rubric isn't some random list of chores. It's guiding you to use the core principles of great level design. To get those max points, you just need to show that you're putting these concepts to work in your levels.
And the same idea applies to the UI rubric. It's asking for a functional in-game HUD with things like a score and a health bar, plus one custom stat that's unique to your game. It's also asking for at least 3 working menus, like a start screen, a pause menu, and maybe a settings screen. Again, this isn't random. It's what makes sure your player has a smooth, professional-feeling experience from the second they start the game.
All right, we're on the home stretch. Our final section, documenting your design. This is all about finishing up your game design document, your GDD. And I know, this can feel like homework, but it is so much more than that. It's the story of your game, and it's a professional portfolio piece you're going to be really proud to show off.
I want you to think of it this way. You've been on this epic journey creating this game from scratch. Well, the GDD is the map of that journey. It shows where you started, the world you decided to build, and all the rules that make it tick. It's proof that you didn't just stumble into a finished game, you designed it with purpose and with intention.
So here it is, your final to-do list for the GDD. You're going to formally describe your game's concept, its key features, and your whole philosophy on level design. You'll pull in concept art to really show the atmosphere and finalize your UI mockups. It is the last, deeply satisfying step that brings all of your hard work together into one amazing professional document.
Look, finishing this project is a massive deal. You've officially gone from being a student to being a game developer. You now have the skills to take an idea from your head and turn it into a living, breathing, interactive world that someone else can experience. So the only real question left is, what world are you going to build next?